If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure the YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address.
And so it got me reflecting a little bit about history. Our history professor here at the table is Symone, and she's very quick to make those links to important periods in our nation's history as part of the progress or lack thereof that we're making. And for me, that circle completion was after the Civil War.
Yeah, talk about it, Michael Steele.
After the Civil War, what happened? We allowed the people who moved against the government, who caused and fought in a way to keep slavery, yes, but even more so to overturn the fundamental foundations of this country. They built monuments to themselves. They started writing the history, and they continue to lie to this day about what those events that were at the heart of the Civil War were about. They are writing at this moment, still writing that history and lying to themselves, to your point, and to the American people about what happened between 1860 and 1865. And now today, 5 years after January 6th, you have this president and those insurrectionists lying to themselves and to the country about what happened on that day.
Very interesting. Michael Steele tried to tout Symone Mamie Sanders as their group's resident history professor. Well, that explains why they're all so ignorant and their understanding of events is so pathetically shallow. She knows as much about history as the average cow munching grass. My apologies to cows. And grass. All he could think about was monuments to the Confederacy because, as a politician, that's the most important thing he can think of. That's what he craves. That's what matters to him. Astonishingly, in spite of herself, Symone Sanders actually managed to make the point that Michael Steele couldn't make. And that was to actually draw a historical corollary between the January 6th rioters and the Civil War.
After the Civil War, it was the great leniency is what folks talk about it as in historical context. Because after Lincoln was assassinated, lots of people got pardons. The Confederates, many of the people who took up arms against the government, who were treasonous. Treason is literally defined in our Constitution. It's defined, it's laid out there black and white. The leniency took over. There were pardons that happened, and everybody just wanted to get back to coming together as a country, to get past it.
After the Civil War, Robert Lee was never prosecuted. In fact, he was allowed to go back to Virginia and become a college president, where his past of leading a genocidal mob across the nation was never held against him. Jefferson Davis, the first and last president of the Confederacy, was briefly imprisoned, but then released and lived out the remainder of his days spreading the myth of the so-called lost cause and laying the groundwork for the sanitization of slavery, the rehabilitation of the Confederate flag, and what would become the race massacres of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. See, the deplorables of the 19th century who carried out the Civil War were all given pardons afterwards by the president. Now, if you listen to the black media, you know that I laid this out for you. In the aftermath of the January 6th insurrection, I also told you about how Adolf Hitler carried out a siege on both the Munich City Hall, taking that local government hostage, and then he went on to Berlin to try the same thing. Over 20 people were killed during that revolt. And just like the Confederates before him and the January 6th insurrectionists after him, Adolf Hitler was also given a slap on the wrist, serving only 9 months in prison for that insurrection. And the end result was that the government of Germany, having refused to punish white offenders, emboldened them to continue their sedition until they overthrew that government 15 years later. But neither Michael Steele nor Symone Mamie Sanders, the resident history professor, ever mentioned that. They're not qualified to talk about history because they don't know it beyond whatever political talking points their DNC paymasters hand to them. And I consider it doubly perverse that Steele was praising Symone Sanders on history because she forgot all about history when she was a feckless and shameless apologist for Biden's crime bill, aka Biden's Law.
Well, look, I think Vice President Biden is going to show everyone today exactly why I decided to join the campaign. Look, we are in a fight for the soul of this nation.
We heard from Senator Harris in that piece from Arlette about her refuting a claim that the vice president made this week that the 1994 crime bill that he wrote did not contribute to mass incarceration. I want you to listen to former President Bill Clinton. This is President Clinton, who signed that into law in 2015.
I signed a bill that made the problem worse, and I want to admit it. In that bill, there were longer sentences. And most of these people are in prison under state law, but the federal law set a trend. And that was overdone. We were wrong about that.
President Clinton says that they were wrong about that. Senator Harris has said that it contributed to mass incarceration. Why isn't Vice President Biden admitting what we're hearing from the former president?
Well, look, I think we can go back to Vice President Biden's comments at the National Action Network breakfast in January, where he noted that the crime bill, by way of this disparity between crack and powder cocaine, trapped an entire generation of people. Look, I think many people will tell you across the country, Victor, black folks included, that the crime bill and the reaction to what was happening in the early 90s. Now, look, I was only about 3 or 4, but I'm a student of history. What was happening in the early 90s, the reaction was an overcorrection to a very real issue. But we are going to see some policy rollouts from our campaign very soon, Victor. I know folks have questions about what is Vice President Biden's criminal justice policy.
Is it now
those are going to come.
Now,
but I mean,
the campaign's position that the crime bill did contribute to mass incarceration?
Victor, I think the vice president, his comments speak for themselves. What is very clear is
his comment was that it does not contribute to mass incarceration. The former president who signed it said it did.
Look, Victor, if we play the whole clip, what he also said was that the majority of folks that are incarcerated were incarcerated at the state level.
And there's a reason for that. Let me put up the truth in sentencing incentives here.
And I mean, there is a reason for that.
But there's a reason. Let me put it up. Let me put it up on the screen, guys. The truth in sentencing section of the 1994 crime bill. This is page 21. It incentivized. It offered billions of dollars to build new correctional facilities if states would increase the percentage of convicted violent offenders, increase the average prison time, increase the percentage of the sentence was there. Did this bill not incentivize putting more people in jail and keeping them there longer?
Victor, I am not going to sit here and tell you the crime bill was perfect. There was some really great preventative things that it did. It took on the NRA, and then there was an overcorrection. What you're describing was an overcorrection. There was a reach. Some folks went too far. The bill wasn't perfect. Republicans fought to put a lot of things in that bill. Democrats fought to get a lot of things out of the bill. But at the end of the day, Victor, at the end of the day, no one is suggesting that what has happened, what has ravaged communities over the last 27 years does not need to be fixed. No one is suggesting that there is not a real issue, there's not a real problem or a real issue. And I'm here to tell you that Vice President Biden will roll out, you'll see a criminal justice policy soon. We are going to continue to have this conversation about the crime bill throughout the campaign trail. But we're also going to put forward some policies, Victor. So just wait and see. Give us a minute. Wait and see.
We will look forward to those. Symone Sanders, thanks so much.
The same Symone Sanders who was sitting on that panel went on live TV years earlier and lied through her horse teeth saying that the mass incarceration that followed the passage of Biden's law, aka the 94 crime bill, was because of state prosecutions, not federal, when she already knew full well that a key provision of the 94 crime bill was the so-called truth in sentencing statute. That promised the states billions of dollars in federal funding, but only if they changed their state laws and made them just like Biden's law. But apparently the defensive lineman Sanders conveniently forgot all about that until Victor Blackwell reminded her. Then all of a sudden it was time to change the subject. Joe Biden praised the Confederacy. He bragged that his state of Delaware was politically aligned with the Confederacy during the Civil War. Biden was himself mentored by segregationists like Senator Eastland, and of course Biden was and remains a mouth-frothing anti-black racist to this day. So the similarities between Symone and the company she keeps dovetails with the January 6 rioters. None of these people are in a moral or intellectual position to talk about these events. Both of the major parties have been active, willing, and aggressive participants in allowing the very white immunity from law that caused both the Civil War and the January 6 insurrection. By the way, on a side note, President Andrew gave a general amnesty to all those traitors during the Civil War, and before that, Abe Lincoln said he just wanted to forget the past and move on, or as he put it, with malice towards none. Well, some of those Confederates paid Abe and members of his cabinet a visit, so there was still plenty of malice. So whether it was the Confederates or Adolf Hitler, the leaders of white supremacy worldwide are part of a suicide cult. Their survival isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is maintaining the white solidarity necessary to maintain white supremacy. That means the system of goodies, giveaways, and most of all, guarantees must remain in place. Because these are the tangible and lived benefits that are part of what you get for being classified as white. This is the glue that holds this whole sick enterprise together. This is how white power bestows benefits on being classified as white and makes it important and something to strive for and something that's supposed to be coveted. And a crucial component of that is making sure those classified as white have freedom of movement and that freedom is not curtailed or ever infringed upon. And the law doesn't touch you because you're free. This is what it means. The laws were written for black people. The conversation that the Michael Steeles and the Symone Mamie Sanders are terrified to have is that the dominant society has a moral blind spot. And when black people are able to drive the political and social discourse, that makes it where the subject has to be addressed. You can't ignore it anymore. And those who try to stand for it then have to answer the question, how can you defend this? The reason that January 6th happened, and why so many of that white mob felt no remorse about beating the hell out of the police, is because many members of that white mob were law enforcement themselves. And as they see it, they didn't betray their badges or their oaths by taking part in that mob. They understand that their oath was to maintain and uphold white primacy. All of the words that we see the liars and bloviators on TV and in print say, the political speeches that are empty words, everybody understands that's just a bunch of hot air. It's meaningless. What matters is how it works in practice. And in practice, it's all about white makes right. There's no difference between criminals attacking the Capitol to uphold white supremacy and thugs with badges attacking black citizens to uphold white supremacy. And you better believe those white police officers, they understand the rules of racism better than anyone. It's their job to uphold them. The white media and the government spent decades lying and claiming that the police can't be prosecuted, and nobody wants to punish the cops because they trust the police. They went from those lies to saying nothing when it finally started happening, when cops started getting prosecuted and locked up. White privilege is the entire reason January 6th occurred. The expectation has been set for hundreds of years that if you're white, the laws won't be allowed to touch you. You'll have white cops, white prosecutors, white judges, and a white media who will all rush to your defense. Everyone knows this. The laws are color-coded. The enforcement of those laws is damn sure color-coded, and the people who commit crimes understand in advance that whether they're charged or not, whether they are prosecuted or not, doesn't depend on whatever offense they were charged with. It doesn't even depend on the evidence. The single most important factor in who goes to prison and who doesn't is the color of their skin. Period. When people know that it doesn't matter if they vandalize a black church, kill a black person, attack the police, or try to overthrow the government, you can't then act shocked and surprised when they decide to do whatever. These people are upset about the orange man and his gang of deplorables rewriting history. But where was this outrage when the white right was allowed to write laws and remove black people's history from books and from schools and running for office on a campaign of promising to protect white people's feelings from history books? Democrats have had a decade to respond politically to this racial censorship, to put together a political platform and a slate of candidates to put back against this legislatively, and to punish those states who enact these kind of so-called laws. But they didn't. They didn't lift a finger, haven't said a word. And that includes people like Michael Steele and Symone, history professor Sanders. They recognized what the white right was doing. Black people were using history as ammunition for advancing our interests, and they wanted someone to attack that. So they let reprobates in red states who they think won't have to pay a price at the polls do it for them. No pushback and no objection from the Democrats in those states. And at the national level, that was the Democrats' response. Silence, which we all know equals assent. Of course the white right's trying to rewrite their own history, the same way Michael Steele has rewritten his own, going from RNC chairman who was chanting drill baby drill and backing all the GOP's lines to now constantly finger-wagging at them. The same way Symone Sanders went from being on Bernie Sanders' campaign because she was so anti-establishment and it was time to get outside of the usual beltway group of entitled chumps to then joining Biden's campaign when Sanders flamed out. And then she was so establishment. We gotta stick with the experts, the people who know how the political machine's supposed to run. And now she's pretending that her morals are consistent. She thinks people have forgotten her past or won't care, but the black media remembers because we're the ones whose dead bodies she's been trying to climb the ladder over. They're all playing the same game, and the phony sanctimony isn't fooling us. These same shills on MSNOW are the very ones who spent years dismissing the murders of black people at the hands of the police and others. They propped up the thugs in blue. And then you have the January 6th insurrection, and what a surprise, a disproportionate number of those white rioters were law enforcement. And sure, the orange man lent his voice to their delusions, but the white media, both left and right, were already backing the blue well before that. And Obama pushed those pro-police policies during his administration too, and Biden after him. When it comes to voting, it's been vote blue no matter who, but it should be back the blue no matter who, because that's what both parties have done. So these creeps can miss me with the whining about how Trump and company have been trying to rewrite their page in history. That's what history is under white supremacy, a lie agreed upon. Nowhere did it say that everyone had to agree on the lie. You only need just enough people for the lie to stick. If Democrats cared so much about history, what have they done to push back against the white right eliminating history books in schools and elsewhere? Where's the Democratic candidates running on a platform of rolling back every GOP law and policy that censored history and to enact punishments for those trying to do it in the future? In other words, where's the legislative reciprocity? Where's the legislative retaliation on their part? Where are the Democrats at to push for aggressively teaching the very things the GOP complains about in so-called blue states? The 1619 Project should be mandatory teaching in all blue states, but it's not. Democrats aren't pushing back at all. And they're lying when they try to claim, well, these things aren't politically popular. That's a lie. Because you never hear them say that with other groups. You can push abortion, transgender bathrooms, and surgeries, and Democrats never tell those constituencies, well, we can't back those initiatives. We can't push back against any GOP legislation on that front because, well, they're just unpopular policies. What they really mean is black people are an unpopular constituency with them. All it took was Clarence Thomas merely hinting that the Supreme Court ought to give a second look to their Dobbs decision that legalized gay marriage, and next thing you know, Democrats were racing to enact a federal law to prevent it. And they didn't take an opinion poll before doing so either, or worry about whether it was popular with Republicans and so-called moderates. The truth is, the black grassroots have been asserting themselves, and this newly rediscovered boldness has always threatened to translate into policy demands. And when you bring up our history, that leads directly to a discussion on reparations. Neither party wants that, because both parties are wholly dedicated to maintaining the racial pyramid in this country, and that pyramid is defined by an iron-rigid system of black economic deprivation. A system that guarantees those not classified as black have a higher position in the society than those who are. Black people asserting ourselves is a direct threat to that system and to its beneficiaries. See, it's those people who have been getting something out of anti-black racism who have also rewritten their own history. For hundreds of years, they've been handed every crumb of their daily bread, but they lie and claim that they pulled themselves up by some imaginary bootstraps, when the truth of the matter was they benefited from black people's uncompensated labor and from the government selectively handing them things through all of these government policies, things that black people were completely and selectively shut out of. And immigrants all tell the exact same cock and bull story that so-and-so's father came to the U.S. with only pocket lint and then built a successful business from scratch, and both the beneficiaries of white privilege and the immigrants all leave out how they both received a nonstop flow of government money, programs, and corporate set-asides reserved specifically for them. All these benefits that black Americans, specifically foundational black Americans, have been deliberately and intentionally shut out of. They always leave that part out when they tell the story. So all these people are lying as they try to convince the world of a phony past that never existed, phony honor that never existed. Ever since the Somalian scam scandal broke out in Minnesota, we haven't heard anybody who's Somalian, or for that matter, most of the Africans in general, saying anything to us, lecturing us about hard work, etc. Haven't heard any of them doing that stuff. Yeah, because what's happening is we're finally having exposed and revealed exactly where a lot of people's so-called prosperity came from. And it wasn't the result of hard work, dent in industry. If they weren't benefiting from federal governments and federal loans and set-asides, then you had these banks with specific programs only for immigrants. And if all else failed, well, you can go ahead and get yourself some quickie contracts from the government. As long as you're not a foundational black American, they'll give you a wink and a nod. Yeah, white supremacy doesn't mind letting some black immigrant think that they're getting over on them, right up until the moment they do mind. History is the collective memory of a people. That's what history is. And when you have individuals, whether it be the Orange Man or whether it be the Symone Sanders and others, attempting to rewrite that history, mostly by deleting or otherwise getting rid of the pages that don't suit them and are not expedient to their interest, that's when you get people who are given a false memory of the past. It's like every cheesy TV show and movie you've ever seen where a character's memory is erased or taken away, and after that, what happens to them? They become a zombie. They believe anything because they don't know any better. The job of the black grassroots is to make sure that people do remember. That's why we spent years reminding you of Biden's deplorable record, all of the phony promises he made when he was running for president, and then how he broke every single one of them. See, there's another bit of history that the Symone Sanders and Michael Steeles and the MSNOWs and the CNNs and others that they all conveniently forget about. All they do is try to claim that Biden kept his promises. No, he kept his promises to the thugs in blue. He kept his promises to immigrants. He kept his promises to the LGBT community. But for foundational black Americans, the few feeble, empty, admittedly fraudulent promises that he made, he didn't keep even those weak little gestures. So what does that tell you? We know that Trump and the white right are a bunch of liars and a bunch of thieves, but keep in mind, Trump told everybody that he could actually close the border. And we had individuals saying it was impossible, couldn't be done. Well, guess what? He managed to pull it off, and now what they're saying is, well, we don't like the way that he did it. See, that's the fundamental contradiction there. Trump has shown that at least where his base is concerned, he's not predisposed to use a whole bunch of lies and excuses on important things, big things. Sure, they're not getting everything that they wanted, but they're getting some of it. And that's a hell of a lot better than the Democrats have managed to do. They haven't delivered on anything. So that's the problem that they don't want to have to face up to. They're angry about all the stuff the Orange Man is doing, while ignoring the fact that at least he is doing something. And if the Democrats are going to be running for office, they have to tell people what they're going to do. But as usual, just as we saw when it came to the white right's attack on black history, the Democrats aren't really saying much of anything at all. They're still trying to see if they can slither their way back into power, if they can skirt their way past all of the objections and skepticism, by doing nothing. Just go ahead and point to the Orange Man and say, be afraid, be very afraid. Okay, we're afraid, but what are you guys going to do? It doesn't matter. We're not Trump. That's all we have to do. Well, what are you going to do about these Republican policies that you allowed them to pass for all these years? Nothing. Sticking up for you people is politically unpopular, so we're not going to do anything about that either. But what about the affordability crisis and the fact that institutional investors are being allowed to create an artificial scarcity of available homes, and Democrats are taking money from these same interests and just letting them do it? What are you going to do about that? Well, even if we passed any laws, it wouldn't make a difference. All right, then, just go ahead and pass some laws then at least as a gesture. Well, there would be legal challenges from the big boys, and that would be a problem. Something that we never hear when these corporations are pushing their agenda down black Americans' throats, be it buying up entire neighborhoods or putting up these data centers literally in every big city, little city, and hamlet all across the country. These things that use up all the municipal water and pollute the air with their energy demands. And then these guys are allowed to operate tax-free because after all, when you're a billionaire, why should you have to pay taxes? To say nothing of the fact that they also make the people who live in these cities pay their electric bill for them. So you got billionaires who are allowed to socialize the costs for their operations, but they privatize the profits. And the question is, what the hell are the Democrats doing about it? Well, what they're doing is they're cheering and saying this is progress and we're going to let them set up anywhere and everywhere. They're not pushing back against anyone on anything, especially if they represent white power or white money. Nobody ever tells any of these wealthy white interests, well, we can't allow you guys to just set up shop or to do anything. I mean, after all, it's so unpopular. You guys are so unpopular. And what about the legal challenges? I mean, we just can't. They never tell them that. You know, Trump never tells his base that they or their asinine demands are unpopular, and he doesn't care who likes it. I heard the Orange Man is talking about a 1-year ban on institutional investors buying single-family homes. Obviously, this is meant as a temporary stunt to buy some goodwill from centrists and his own poor supporters, to make it look like he's doing something about the housing crisis. But the real goal for Trump is, as usual, to do something big and loud and try to give himself some headlines, because he knows that that's what his low IQ voters will actually remember. They won't remember whether or not he actually followed through on it or actually did it. What they will remember was that they saw some headlines about it sometime in the past. Most Americans, left and right, never actually read beyond the headlines of a particular news story, so the MAGA crowd in particular, who are very illiterate, they're not even going to know that Trump's so-called ban is only going to last for about a year. Even if it was substantive, it's not, but let's pretend like it was. It doesn't matter, because in about 11 months it's going to go away anyway, right after the midterms. So Trump's going to attempt to have it both ways. He wants to have all the benefits of having this so-called ban on a problem for the American people, while at the same time protecting those same institutional investors. They just got to go ahead and cool their heels for a few months. But it's beyond pathetic that Donald Trump, of all people, even with his admittedly duplicitous gesture, has done more than Democrats have done on this issue on any level anywhere. This is supposed to be their position, by the way. This is supposed to be a position that they're supposed to own. They're supposed to be the ones doing this, to shut down vultures like Blackstone and BlackRock. But as I told you, Kamala Harris got over $300,000 from the president of Blackstone, Jonathan Gray, and Blackstone is America's largest landlord. And she also had a BlackRock executive as part of her campaign team up until September of 2024. The very people who caused the housing crisis were paying her campaign and quote-unquote advising her on what to do about the mess they made. And what was their advice? Well, as we saw, it was nothing. Don't do anything about it. They can whine about Trump all they want, but they're no better than he is. And until they are better and start doing things to prove that they're better, we have no reason to listen to them or their sock puppets. I see Symone Sanders and Michael Steele as perfect examples of the kind of political bottom feeders who understand what their job is, to sell the soap. And they switch sides so easily because when your only core principle is have cash, will babble, then it doesn't matter if you're a mouthpiece for a phony political disruptor like Bernie Sanders, who truth be told wasn't disrupting anything. You can still switch horses in the middle of the political race and go work for his opponent, who's supposed to be the establishment who you swore you wouldn't work for, and the white media won't point out this hypocrisy, and they're not going to say, why should we listen to you on anything? In fact, they'll hire you afterwards. And Michael Steele can go from drill baby drill to suddenly being all sentimental about the environment, and he can go from basically saying the 1% have nothing to apologize for to now questioning the soundness of Republican economic policies, because he's on MSNOW too. And that's who pays his bills, just like they pay Symone Sanders. And they think that we won't remember what they really stand for and what they've actually done? Clearly, they're the ones who must have forgot. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Darlette Hall, John Harvin, Abram Pruitt, Roxanne Allen, and Kevin Evans. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.